Hi, everyone. You are watching The Self Connection with Ginny Brown and Kelly Pietro, where we have conversations with a group of ascended masters known as the Multitude of the Greater Good.
The multitude is a group of ascended masters, teachers, and healers, and higher frequency energies who share with us their knowing and understanding of how it is for us to allow ourselves to grow to be better selves. It is, here they go. It is important to understand that each one on the earth plane has come for a reason. Each one has come to allow themselves the growth, love, care, and understanding of allowing. When one is able to say, oh, I did this, or oh, I did that, and I don't like that I did that, it does not matter. Each experience is a learning experience on the spiritual level, and each experience adds and adds and adds to one's growth bank of knowledge and learning and understanding of being. Do not be concerned.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and ask your questions.
Well, that's a good opening.
Yeah,
Okay, so since they are ascended masters and teachers and healers, I thought we could talk about the concept of ascension. So we have our earthly understanding or understandings. I'm sure all people have different types of understandings of what ascension means or what it means to ascend. But let's start with asking the multitude, what is the meaning of ascension?
it is important to understand that each person on the earth plane is a counterpart of their spiritual selves. And when one is able to allow oneself the spiritual understanding that there is more to one's being than that which one can see on the earth plane, one is able to allow oneself to experience differently. Therefore, one is able to move oneself forward in learning, in knowing, and understanding, and being, and in so doing, raises the energetic frequency of themselves in the earth being, in the earth body, in the earth spirit of being. In our estimation, it is important to understand that the term ascension refers to the ability and the growth of one's being in allowing one's frequency to expand itself, therefore allowing oneself to so-called raise their frequency, which is another term for ascension. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Okay, I think when people talk about ascending, what comes to mind are concepts of like you think about like Buddha or yogis who are just like able to meditate all day and and have a higher level of consciousness. I guess I'm wondering because a lot of what they said was had to do with more doing, and what you do on the earth plane expands yourself, increases your vibration. What, hmm, like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is we often associate that with all what we on the earth plane would call positive experiences lead to ascension, right? The ability to sit still and meditate, or generosity, or, you know, being able to overcome emotional triggers, all these types of things. And I guess I'm just wondering after the message they just channeled that talked about doing and experiencing, and if there's this understanding that from a higher perspective that there's no good or bad. Like, is there ascension that happens through any kind of experience, or are there specific experiences that lead to ascension and higher frequency? And what are they?
All kinds of experiences, my dear, all kinds. Does not matter if one designates it to be or labels it to be good or bad. It is a learning experience of a sort. And each time one learns, each one allows oneself to, that's like, it's hard to explain, but I can tell you what I'm seeing. It's like it's like when you have a suitcase and it's full, and then you keep piling more on and piling more on and piling more on. And it's about the knowledge that we have. That we have a great deal of knowledge, but each time we experience something which might be labeled good or bad or whatever, it brings in more knowledge, and you pile more knowledge on top of that. And that is how it works, whether or not one deems it to be a positive experience. Whatever experience is an experience of being, and the experience of being contributes an experience of knowledge. And each one allows oneself to expand oneself in the energetic way, in the knowledgeable way, in the moving forward way. It is all part of the growth of being on the earth plane. In our estimation, the energetic way is much more difficult for those to understand on the earth plane. However, we can tell you when one sits quietly and acknowledges oneself in any way, it does not matter the being or the doing. What matters is one is being who they are when they are. If one takes 5 minutes to say, oh, I'm just going to rest here because I'm tired, or I don't feel good, or I just need a break. That is perfect alignment with oneself, perfect knowing, and perfect allowing. Do not be concerned.
Yeah, I often think of when I witness, whether it's through listening to someone's story, like on a YouTube video, or just watching friends in their journey. Oftentimes, when I see someone has a path full of deep, deep suffering, those who've endured horrible things, like what comes to me is like, oh wow, they are an evolved soul to be able to sign up for that level of pain. And then they're also through that given the opportunity to expand even more through the potential healing process if they choose it. Is there truth to that?
It is important to understand, my dear. Each one knows why it is that each one has come to the earth plane. And if it is that one has chosen to learn something in a certain way, it is not necessarily a damaging process. It is not necessarily one that needs to be fixed in any way. When one allows oneself to experience on the earth plane, sometimes the joy or the pain is inconsequential. It is the learning that is the important part. When one moves forward in joy, it is quite a wonderful thing. And when one moves forward in pain, one believes it is a negative process. However, we can tell you whether it is joy or pain, it is a learning process of being. We can tell you, however, when one allows oneself to feel the pain, it is important to understand that one knew that one wished to accomplish would not be easy. One knew when coming to the earth plane that one wished to learn or accomplish or expand might be a little more difficult in this lifetime. We can tell you when one allows oneself to an experience such as that, one is able to say, oh, I know that I am not going to have a fun life, but I know that when I return, I will be most pleased with my growth and process. Do not be concerned, my dear. It is quite perfect indeed.
Okay, so maybe that's just my own judgment, kind of looking at somebody's life path and going, wow, that's a lot to endure. They must be an evolved soul. Like, it sounds like not necessarily.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like it's a judgment to me. It sounds like, you know, some kind of compassion for that person, having gone through that, and then sort of an awe in that they would have chosen to experience something like that on that level. It doesn't sound like a judgment or a negative to me at all.
No, you're describing it exactly right. I guess the judgment that I'm talking about is me saying, like looking at that and making an assumption that it is more than another person's path who might look easier. That might not be true.
No, no, not at all. Another person's path that might look easier might have all kinds of internal issues within that person that you can't see. We tend to compare our insides with someone else's outsides. Therefore, we cannot know what another person is feeling unless they tell us. Or we can feel certain things, that's for sure, but we can't know what they're thinking or how their life is if we can only know ours and we can only see what they show us of theirs.
So then, that being said,
Sorry.
it's okay. Is it safe to think that, or is it correct to say that ascension simply comes through experiencing more and more and more? And that, let's say, like an ascended master, probably just, it's not what kind of life they lived, but it's that they may have lived several lives and gained more and more experience through that diversity of different types of lifetimes.
And what was the first part of that question?
It's like, I guess the question really is like how does one ascend? Is ascension achieved not through the type of experience you have in a single lifetime or a collection of lifetimes, but the number of lifetimes one experiences.
Well, what I originally got was all of the above. However, we can tell you, my dear, it does not matter how many lifetimes. What matters is that each one prepares oneself for the experience that one has planned to achieve in the lifetime that they are living or choosing. And each time one completes a lifetime, they complete with more knowledge, more knowing, more understanding. And when they choose to reincarnate, they will allow themselves to bring with them that which they believe is required. We can tell you, however, one cannot always know what is required. Therefore, it is important for one to move forward in their knowing and also allowing themselves to release that which is not pertinent or required. Therefore, allowing the information that is required to come to them, as in their knowledge, their feeling self, their knowing self. We can tell you as one moves forward and within themselves in that area of being, there is a great deal accomplished, no matter what one knows or what one understands on the earth plane. When one moves forward in an experience of a lifetime, one is able to achieve a great deal in, it's like ups and downs, and in that part of self that knows that no matter what, they will be fine in their being. In our estimation, it is important to understand that as each one moves forth and each one allows oneself to be who one is, there is a great deal that is able to be accomplished. However, there are those who cannot know, those who cannot understand, those who say, oh, that's not for me. I'm not interested in that. And we can tell you that regardless of what their mind says, when their heart is in operation, they are learning as well. They are experiencing as well, and they are allowing themselves the growth required. In our estimation, it is important to understand that as each one moves forward, each one moves forward. And when each one believes that they have stepped backwards, they are still moving forward in their learning, in their knowledge, in their understanding. Do not be concerned. All is love.
Thank you. Okay, so that makes me think about this term shifting into a higher frequency. You hear this a lot now in kind of spiritual discussions, like I'm vibing higher, I'm operating at a higher frequency than that person. That person is really low frequency. And I guess I want the multitude to kind of demystify that a bit and help us to better understand the concept of ex- of existing in a higher frequency versus not. So if they can say anything about that.
Well, I would think that I would like them to explain an energetic frequency before they answer.
Yes, thank you. Good idea.
It is important to understand that when one comes to the earth plane, one allows oneself to be who one is. However, when one is on the earth plane, one cannot always handle the energy of a person, for instance. Therefore, one needs to, it's like shut oneself down, close oneself down in order to be able to experience Earth. Earth is a very, one might say, low frequency, but a closed off frequency. And when one comes to the Earth plane, one needs to, it's like lower their frequency, but uh, condense themselves into a being in order to fit in or live on the earth plane. When one is able to establish oneself and allow oneself the growth required, then one is able to allow themselves to open more and more to one's own frequency of being, the energetic frequency of being, as one is always energetic. One is always in a state of allowing the energy to flow. However, on the earth plane, it is a very small, pinched off allowance of flow of energy. Therefore, when one refers to raising one's frequency, 99% of the time, it has to do with opening one's range of being in order to allow one's own frequency to come through and expand oneself in that way. It is not a matter of attaining new energy or new frequency. It is a matter of allowing oneself to be who one is when one is. And when one is able to establish one's footing on the earth plane, one is able to expand itself as far as the earth energy will allow. There are those who can say, oh, I am of a high frequency, and therefore, when I come to the earth plane, I will remain in that frequency and it will be quite easy. And in the energetic state, it is quite easy. However, when one comes into the earth plane in a physical being, that confinement is quite distressing to a person. Therefore, one may believe that that is all there is. However, we can tell you there is far more to that person than meets the eye in our estimation. When one is able to move oneself forward in such a way as to allow themselves to connect with themselves and allow their own energetic frequencies to come to the earth plane, then they are able to allow themselves greater sense of being, greater sense of knowing, and greater sense of understanding. However, if one believes in a hierarchical hierarchical level, it cannot happen, as there is no hierarchy. There is only that part of self that allows oneself to be oneself. And when one sits quietly and allows oneself to expand oneself in an energetic way, one is able to raise one's frequency, so to speak, as one is opening to one's own energy, allowing it to come forth. Do not be concerned. And what kept going through my mind is it's always there. The energy is always there.
Yeah, I think that like what comes to mind for me of like moving in and out of frequencies, because I I do think a lot of people think of it in this like linear way of I'm going through life and I experience something, I overcome, and um so my soul is shifting into a higher frequency. I hear people talk about it this way. And then I hear about people just honestly, like there's a lot of like toxic positivity out there that's like, just ignore the bad stuff and stay in a high vibe. And it's like you're really like gaslighting your own feelings and not allowing yourself to feel those things so that you can make true progress, increase your capacity. Um, and then maybe in doing so, you end up feeling in a higher frequency. I feel like to me, as I understand it, is your frequency changes moment to moment. Sometimes it's what we might define as high, sometimes it's low, depending on what's going on. And that you can open up and access to the part of you in spirit that is constantly available to experience higher frequency. But like it's not necessarily great to gaslight yourself into feeling that. Do you know what I mean?
Well, if you're going to gaslight yourself into feeling that, you're not feeling that. It's just, it's a mind thing.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at.
It's a mind thing. It is important to understand that when one opens one's heart to oneself, that is when one allows oneself to, quote, raise one's frequency, so to speak. It is the time one allows oneself to connect with oneself and allow one's own knowing, one's own experiencing to come forward. In our estimation, it is important to understand that as it is, one allows oneself to be who one is when one is. It does not matter what one is doing. One is in connection with oneself always. One is allowing oneself always. And if one decides, well, this is not the right time for me to allow myself, one will allow that part of self to remain disconnected until one is ready to allow oneself the connection again. Do not be concerned.
Okay, so I think we also hear a lot of people talk about lower vibrational states such as fear, shame, guilt, helplessness, hopelessness, on and on. There's probably a million, right? Anger, but and then they'll talk about higher vibrational states such as joy, elation, compassion, unconditional love, on and on and on. And we talk about those as low vibration, high vibration, and then there's this connotation that if you're experiencing one of these, that's where your frequency is. That's where your soul is experiencing frequency. Is there truth to that? And if not, can you elaborate and clarify?
It is important to understand that one's soul is not static. it moves, it vibrates, it allows itself to change itself as needed. If one on the earth plane believes there is a problem, there is a problem. Therefore, we would highly recommend that if it is that you are interested in remaining in a higher state of consciousness, we would highly recommend that you allow yourself to remain in a state of openness. If it is that one believes there is a low frequency energy in a mental completion of a process, there will be a low state of frequency. If it is that one believes there is a higher state of frequency in joy, for instance, one will allow a higher state of frequency within oneself. However, we can tell you 99% of the time it is labeled and mislabeled. It is important to understand there is always a frequency and it is always available. And if one is interested in moving from what might be deemed as a lower state of frequency, one might consider opening one's heart to oneself and allowing oneself to feel what it is like to be in the part and process of a lower state of frequency. And when one allows oneself to complete a process such as that, one will allow the frequency to connect with oneself and allow the frequency changes required to move oneself forward. Do not be concerned.
I love that. Okay, so what I think I heard was it's not about the any given moment emotion you're feeling that determines your frequency. It's your ability to be open to yourself to move through any emotion and grow from it. Um, and just allow yourself to feel it. So like what comes to mind for me is like, let's say you're in an angry place. And I don't mean like just in a moment. It can be just in a moment where something triggers you and now you're angry, like road rage. Or it could just be like you've been angry for a long time. And it's like, instead of judging that as bad, it's like allowing yourself to feel it, whether that's consciously or unconsciously, allowing yourself to feel it so that you can, and then being open to feeling it so that you can move through it instead of resisting it and suppressing it.
Yeah, I keep pushing it away. It's like, yeah, I don't like that. It's not good. Instead of acknowledging, yeah, that's part of me and it's part of me and it's okay feeling it.
Yeah, I think it's so important to remind ourselves of our humanness and that being human means experiencing a range of emotions. And that doesn't, just because some of those emotions don't feel good, or maybe they trigger other people just by feeling them, like that doesn't make it a bad thing. It just makes you human. Like
Right.
we all feel a lot of things and it's okay. And you don't have to judge yourself for feeling those things. But if you remain open to allow yourself to feel them fully without kind of bleeding on everyone else, uh, but let yourself feel it in a safe space that promotes growth, and then you can move on, hopefully. But it might come back again though. Like that's the human cycle. That's the spiral of life. But
Yeah. But then on an energetic level, that gets into past lives because there are so many things we've experienced throughout our lifetimes that we haven't acknowledged, we haven't felt, and we carry that emotion through in order for it to be healed and to be felt. So it's the same thing. It's just acknowledging it's there, acknowledging the feeling, which you may have no idea where it had come from, but acknowledging that it's there and allowing yourself to move through it. connect with it the same thing as you're speaking about life.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really great point, Jenny. Like, I think we like to, or I don't know if other people do. I do this where I want to understand it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this and I don't know why, and it doesn't make sense. And then I'm like almost shaming myself for feeling it because I can't understand its origins.
Right.
And so I'm searching and searching and searching. And it's like, well, sometimes you're not going to find the origins. Just let yourself feel it. Come out of the head into the heart, let yourself feel it without the explanation or the need for the explanation.
Exactly.
Because it might not be of this lifetime. So
Mhm.
just let it move through you. And then in doing so, you are processing it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Oh, there was something else that came up as you were saying oh, kind of like if you're witnessing somebody else going through a moment or a season of life where they are experiencing lower vibrational feelings
Yeah.
and then having judgments about that as being a bad thing and they really need to and like you projecting what you think they need. I actually just now I heard let them, which is like kind of this trendy concept that Mel Robbins, I think her name is I think she wrote a book about it, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, the let them theory." It's like, what do you mean? Like just not being codependent? Like, yeah, let them have their journey, let them have their feelings. You don't have to rescue you. It doesn't say anything about you. Let other people have their journey. So in the same way, it's like if you're witnessing someone having a moment or a season of life of anger, frustration, resentment, whatever it might be, you don't know what their soul is accomplishing through that process. It might be a very important process for them to move through. And so, yeah, letting them have that and not always feeling like it's your place to intervene.
Right. But what that brings to mind for me is detachment.
Yeah.
When I am, and I used to do this, and I can remember my mother doing this. But when I am with someone who's having a hard time, I'm right in there with them, feeling that hard time. And when I'm right in there with them, I can't be there for them. The only way I can be there for them is detach and let them have their own feelings, but be there for them, be there for what they need, be there by their sides. On the other hand, if you're there for someone and they start to take advantage of you in another way, then it's for you to stand up for yourself and then just kind of take care of yourself in whatever way you need, back off or whatever. But to still support someone who is in like a crisis situation that you're talking about without.
Yes. It's like the difference of like offering help and moving to rescue. I mean, obviously, certain situations, like a rescuing help, is the most compassionate thing to do. Like, there's a car accident and someone's being pulled from, like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more about like emotional processes. Yeah. To jump in and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you're suffering. What if I do this and then you can do that?" And it's like, oh, you just kind of like step.
Yeah, you're just trying to fix it for them and let
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
instead of letting them to do it. But I'm not talking about that either. I'm talking about um, feeling inside you all the feelings that they're feeling. Therefore, you're in such a state of distress as they are in a state of distress that you can't help them through their state of distress. The only way you can do that, in my opinion, and from what I've learned also, is to step back and let them be in their state of a distress, but then be there to help them in the ways you're talking about helping them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point because that rescuing can happen physically, the way I described, or emotionally by allowing yourself to like totally be empathic in the way of experiencing it with them. So it's like an emotional detachment.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, I tend to always come from the emotion or from the higher levels of the energetic levels
Yeah.
or higher, the energetic levels of being rather than the earth plane stuff. I find the earth plane stuff difficult for me because the energetic is so much easier for me.
Well, we're a good match, Ginny. We'll hit the yin and the yang
Yeah.
together. Yeah. Oh, there's something that came to mind as you were saying that. Um, oh, I was thinking about my friend Andrea Grace. She has the Alila Center in New Jersey, and she talks about archetypes and studying archetypes, their higher expression and their lower expression. Is that what she calls them? Really kind of helps you to see like what came to mind when you were talking and when we were sharing these different kind of viewpoints, like the earthly and the more energetic, is martyrdom, right? Like the idea of martyrdom as an archetype being like the one who will sacrifice themselves for the sake of another, whether that's physically or emotionally, like I'm going to feel all the feelings of and maybe martyrdom's not the right archetype for this, but that's what came to me. It's like I'm going to feel all these feelings for another person or with another person. It's almost to you almost sacrifice a bit of yourself because you're not able to be grounded in that moment. um I don't know, I have found studying archetypes to help me fully understand like those different aspects of being a kind of what am I expressing in that moment? And then when you know the lower expression and the higher, you can kind of find a way to move out of the lower and into the higher. It's a mental process, but I'm a
Yeah,
mental person. It helps me.
that's good.
Yeah. Um, okay, well, one last question, I think, about stuckness, feeling stuck in a certain, which to me is like stuck in a certain vibration or stuck in a certain pattern, and the idea of shifting into a higher frequency from that stuckness, right? What can the multitude tell us about how to move out of a stuck feeling into uh, a higher frequency or a better place of being?
It is important to understand that each one allows oneself to be where they need to be at the time they need to be there. If it is that one is feeling stuck, so to speak, it is part and parcel of what one's experience on the earth plane entails. And when one is allowing oneself to sit and focus on what it is that one wants, what it is that one needs, and how it is for one to be, one will be able to allow oneself to release oneself from that stuck place. It is not a matter of saying, oh, if this were right, then I would do that. And if this is going to happen, then I would do that. And I don't like this, so I'm not doing that. It is a matter of saying, this is what I want. This is what I need. And this is how it is that I need to move myself forward. And when one allows oneself to sit and feel the feelings of isolation, or the feeling of distrust, or the feeling of inallowability, one is able to allow oneself to move in a direction of opening more to oneself. It is a matter of saying, I know what I need, I know what I want. And sometimes one does not know how to attain what one needs or wants. It is important, however, for one to feel the feeling of desire, feel the feeling of knowing that it is right for them, and moving forward from that stance of being. In our estimation, that is a way the right way, a good way, the best way, the only way. It is how one moves oneself forward. Do not be concerned. Do not be concerned. No. Yeah. Do not be concerned. All is love.
All right, I think that's a good place to stop unless the multitude has any final educational points for us to understand about ascension and shifting frequencies.
It is important to understand that each one on the earth plane is free and open to shift their frequencies in any way they wish. Sometimes they choose to allow themselves to feel more of their own energy. Sometimes they choose to allow oneself to narrow the scope of one's energy. It does not matter. What matters is one has the power. And when one is able to say, this is what I want, this is what I need, one will allow oneself to shift one's energetic frequency in order to match their wants and needs. It is important to understand there are many ways that people experience this. And when one moves forward in one's own knowing, one will know how to proceed. What's the next step and the next step? In our estimation, when one allows oneself to feel whatever it is they are feeling, good, bad, or indifferent, so to speak, each one will allow oneself to open to that which they need and close to that which they don't need. And if one is in a series of closures, it is important to understand the only way that we are aware for one to allow oneself the growth is to be open to the fact that one has the power, one has the ability, and one is able to move oneself forward by being who one is, when one is. Do not be concerned, all is love.
Thank you.
Okay, you're quite welcome.
All right, well, if you guys have any follow-up questions to some of the stuff we talked about today, or any questions that may have come up for you, feel free to submit them. You can go to my website, www.themindfulherbalist.com, click on the self-connection, and there's a form at the bottom of the page where you can submit your questions. And if you have personal questions, you can book a one-on-one session with Ginny. You can go to her website, ginnybrown.net. Yeah.
And if you have any personal questions or inquire or require Kelly's help, she has her own website. It's the Mindful Herbalist, and she'll have to tell you
Yeah,
it's mindfulherbalist.com. Yes.
that's right.
Okay.
That's simple. All of our links are in the episode description. So if you want to click away there, you absolutely can. We welcome your questions. We need more questions right now. So don't be shy. Send away. You can send multiple questions. I like concise questions. If you have a theme with multiple questions, that's helpful too. But yeah, let's keep this going. We've got, we've been kind of doing topics that interest me, and obviously we've been taking viewer questions. So let's see what else is out there, what your interests are. We look forward to helping you guys out on your journey.
Yeah. We are most pleased that everyone who is aware of who they are is able to move themselves forward. And we are most pleased to have the opportunity to share our expertise through such a modern conversation and connection. Thank you for allowing us to be who we are, and all is love. So thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Ginny. Thanks, Multitude, for always being here. And we'll see you guys next time on the Self Connection.
Bye-bye.
Bye.